All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for coming, participating. We might have more that come join. I'm going to have to keep an eye on the. You come into a waiting room. They've changed the way that Zoom's set up because I guess across the U.S. there's been a lot of what do they call it? Zoom bombing, where people just show up on your conference call without being a
member.
Without being an invitee. And because and there have been situations where people have just been using somebody else's Zoom account since really all you need to do to get in is to just use the number. And so now they've automatically made some changes, so there's a little waiting room that you have to come into. So anyway, I'll keep an eye on that. Welcome everybody. Why don't we start with a prayer? Mark Nelson, would you mind giving us a prayer?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Our Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this opportunity that we have to meet this day. We're grateful for Brother and Sister Tuckett and giving us their time and expertise and helping us to learn a little bit more about family search and how we can use the great technology that we have been blessed with. And we pray that Thy blessings will be with us and help us to understand what we need to know to be able to be successful in helping to find those who need their temple work done in our families. And we pray for these blessings and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate that. So we are recording for those who didn't hear it when I said it a little bit earlier. So this is for posterity's sake. I'm not sure if I legally have to say that or not, but where I work, we have to make sure everybody knows that we're recording. So anyway, I'm going to share my screen. And, nope, not that one. Must be this one. Can people see the family search screen that we're sharing here? Anybody can guess?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So last time we met was a couple weeks ago. Boy, it seems like forever. Being stuck in the house makes time go pretty darn slow. But we talked about, kind of did a real basic overview of family search. There's the video. Yeah, probably.
Sorry.
If you didn't have a chance to go through that and you feel like you ought to, it's posted on Facebook. It was also, I think, in the email that Brother Palmer sent out. So if for some reason you can't seem to find it, let me know. This would be kind of a continuation of where we left off with that. So what we did last time was we kind of went through all of the high-level aspects of family search. We talked a little bit about using your family tree. We talked really briefly about the person record, about private trees versus the public tree. And we kind of ended up by going through and how to use the Ordinance Ready application, or feature, I guess, in this case, of family search. So today we want to kind of continue where we left off, talk a little bit more about the family tree, show you some additional techniques on finding ordinances, and be able to resolve a duplicate. If you run into an ordinance, you got a green temple and there's a duplicate there, we'll walk through that. And hopefully at that point you have enough of an idea to kind of go home and be able to start looking for ordinances to someday be able to take to the temple. Whenever that is, I'm not sure we know, but I'm sure at some point in time. My wife is very full of faith that the fasting that we started our fast tonight for tomorrow, that within a week or so, all this stuff's going to be pretty much resolved, right?
Not a week.
Okay. So she has a lot more faith than I do there, but anyway. So with that in mind, so when you just kind of going back and talking a little bit more about Ordinance Ready was really built so that kind of right at the time that you're ready to go to the temple, you can go and get an ordinance. So if you are going to do an endowment session, you can go and get, you get one name to do that endowment session. If you're gonna go do baptisms, you get, I forget, like 3 or 4 names to do baptisms. So it's it's limited in the, it's great in the fact that, you know, right there on the fly, you can go and get an ordinance to do, but it's limited in that, you know, you probably don't want to go through that if you're just trying to collect some additional cards, so you've got a bunch of ordinances to do. It's a little bit limiting. So with that in mind, we talked a little bit about another way that you can find ordinances, and the easy way to do it is to start with your fan chart. So if you're new to Family Search, obviously you've logged in at this point, and you go here to Family Search and then to Tree. And depending on what you were doing last time you were in here, it will either show you, it will show you the last type of chart that you were looking at. For me, that's a fan chart. For you, it might not be. But right up here in the upper left, there's a drop down where you can pick what type of chart you want to see. So for me, I already had the fan chart. It might be something that you have to go a couple of clicks to be able to see. When your fan chart comes up, it may be a smaller fan chart where it only shows 4 generations or all the way up to 7 generations. And you can control that with this little selector here. And so for my chart, I'm now showing 7 generations. It's kind of big, so I'll make it a little bit smaller with this plus and minus over here that controls the size of the zoom. Now, with the fan chart, you can see a lot of different kind of views of your fan chart by clicking on one of these various options. I've got ordinances selected, and what it does is it shows me where ordinances are still need to be done. When it's white, that actually means that the ordinances for this person are completely done. Where it's kind of this bluish color, blue-green, it means that they're in progress, meaning they've been reserved, and somebody is waiting to take them to the temple, or they've taken some of the ordinances to the temple and are waiting to take others. And then you might also see this in an orange color, which means that that more information is needed to be able to continue to be able to do the ordinance. And if it's green, which, you know, we really love the green ones, because what that means is that there are ordinances to be done that you can take to the temple. So I want to show you first a way that you can just, you know, if you just have some time and kind of want to peruse your family tree, you can find these green, you know, we're really looking for the green ones here, by just simply coming in and clicking on a part of your tree and seeing if there are any green ones there. And if you haven't used the fan chart before, you might notice if I hover over it, it kind of turns a different color, if you notice that. And when I hover over it, right here at the kind of the bottom of this person is a little fan. It's supposed to look like a fan anyway. Well, when I click on that fan, it puts that person in the middle. I know, I'm just going. So I just was able to take this person. This is Charles Tuckett. He's my great, so many greats grandpa. I guess it's 7 generations. And you notice that there are some whites, there are some blues, some yellow orangish colored ones, and some green ones. So these green ones are ones that what I would typically do is, if you click on just where the name is, it pops up this little card that gives you a summary of that person. And down here at the bottom, it tells you which ordinances that still need to be done. And so in this case, it's sealed to spouse that still needs to be completed. Now, in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how to resolve duplicates, because there are times when you get to this point and you're really excited and you kind of you find that there is a duplicate, and so you're not able to do the ordinance. I actually don't know if this is one of those. I just clicked on the person where it said person there. And for this John Pierce, I'm going to come right here to ordinances. It'll tell me more detail about the ordinance. So here's the request for seal to spouse. I'm going to click on it. And this is a good one that can be done as you can reserve it right now. And you would reserve it by clicking request here. And it provides you some details around the policy of the church. These are really important. Just kind of start kind of at the bottom and work my way up. But so the first thing is that for a person who was born in the last 110 years, the closest living relatives are the ones that are able to do the work for them. So if this is your spouse, parent, grandparent, you would be able to do the work for them. If you're kind of outside of that closest living relative, you have to actually get permission if you want to do the ordinance for them. And to get the permission, you have to get that verbal approval directly from one of the closest relatives. So a couple of other things to keep in mind. when you're at this point and ready to reserve an ordinance, there are some types of ordinances that you actually can't reserve, and it may allow you to reserve them, but it's church policy that you not reserve them. And they are famous people. Now, you know, we are all famous people to some extent, but it really is, you know, people who are, you know, in the media a lot, you know, presidents of the United States, movie stars, sports stars, especially these that you have no relationship with. So if your grandpa, you know, was president of the United States, then not only is that person a famous person, but it's also your grandpa. So, you know, that's something that you could do. But for the most part, famous people are off limits. Jewish Holocaust victims, the church has an agreement with the Jewish people that we will not do the work for Jewish Holocaust victims. And if they are an immediate family member, you could do them, or otherwise, or you can get permission from the immediate family. Other than that, we don't do the work for Jewish Holocaust victims. And then, you know, for the most part, you really should be focusing on the ordinances of people who are fairly close in your immediate line. Whether that's, you know, directly people that show up in your fan chart, which is generally how you're going to find people, or you know, it could be a cousin or something like that. But we generally want direct line ancestors that you should be focusing on. So if everything looks good there, then you accept that policy, and this person has now been reserved for me and will show up. It's not print, it hasn't been printed, but notice that it says that it's reserved for me, and I have 2 years, notice it says 2 years. I have 2 years to complete this ordinance, and after that 2 years, in most cases, it will just go back as being unreserved, and you'll have to reserve it again. So, you know, for the most part, that's probably fine. We can get these ordinances done in that time. So that's reserved. I will just say also that if you come up here to the main menu and you click on temples, you can now see this reserved person as well as all the other ones. So this is going to list all of those that I have reserved and whether they're printed or not printed. And it might take a little while for this to come up. It's kind of slow, but okay. So
I had come across one today that said I had 3 years to reserve it instead of 2, and I wondered if it was because the temples are closed right now. And this, right. It says here that that is the reason that we're seeing 3 years now on some of
and in the one that you saw, it said that it expires in 2023.
Yes.
Even though mine that I just did, it showed that it expired in 2022. Right. So yeah, definitely they're giving us a little bit more time to get those done. So across the top here, all of these reserved items can really fit into 3 categories. There are ones that I've printed. So I've printed the card and I'm ready to take it to the temple. There are those that I haven't printed a card yet. And then I can also share these. I can share them with the temple. And I can, because maybe I'm not going to be able to get to doing all of these on my own. So let's put them in front of people who can do that work for them. And we share them with the temple. And by the way, if you see that they're shared with the temple, they have a little bit different color and they're pretty easy to spot. So with that, I mean, are there any questions about, you know, just simply reserving an ordinance and kind of managing the ordinances like we're doing right here? Okay, very good. So let's go back to John, well, back to my family tree. So we've fairly quickly found that there were some green. Well, now notice this one that was green now. In fact, this one was green too because it's a sealed espouse. Now they're both reserved ordinances and they turned kind of purple.
Oh, that's just they're in progress.
Yeah, they're reserved. Obviously, they're not in progress this moment, unless it's some temple that we're not aware of. So I'm trying to find one of these that is, and it might not even be this one. I'm trying to find one of these that shows that there's a possible duplicate. So you might get one of the green temples and you click on it to reserve it and you get a message like this that says possible duplicates. So in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how do we resolve those duplicates, because it's going to be important for you to be able to get these ordinances done. You can't do them right now. You notice that the request button down here is disabled for me to be able to request these ordinances. Now, in some cases, the ordinances have already been done, but they were done under a different record. And so if you were to be able to do them now, you would be duplicating the ordinances anyway. And that's kind of a waste of time. Let's focus on the ones that don't have the ordinances done. So thus, we want to make sure that we can resolve those. So more to come on resolving the duplicates. Shannon's going to take us through the process of doing that here in a few minutes. So, so back to my tree. So one thing I can do, in fact, I'm going to go back one more here. So I'm at the root of my tree. So one thing you can do to find ordinances is just kind of systemically going through around your fan chart and looking for green temples. And when you find people that come way out here at the edge, you can click on them too. And you know, it's pretty easy to get lost when you're doing this. But if you take a little bit of time, you're going to find some green temples that you didn't know existed. So that's a pretty simple way of just navigating through your fan chart to find green temples. So there's another way that I want to talk a little bit about as well. And by the way, if you get totally lost and you don't know how to find your way back, right up here there's this tab called Recents. This shows the recent things that you've done or the recent people. Notice that at the top of it, it always has you listed. And so if you find you can either click here to get your person record, or you can click on this tree to go back to you in the middle, in the root of your tree. So if you get lost, that's a pretty easy way to be able to find your way back. So the other way that I want to show you how to find an ordinance is it's a kind of a three-step way of doing it. And it's what we started with teaching families in our ward to do. But that was before Ordinance Ready was there and before you could see the ordinances on the fan chart in color. But it's still applicable, and it's going to help you to find ordinances that maybe you wouldn't have found otherwise. So the first thing is we want to start with your fan chart, and we want to find somebody on your fan chart that has been dead for more than 110 years. In fact, in some ways, it's usually better to go back even further than that. Like maybe if you go back into the earlier 1800s or even the 1700s, you may find that it's easier. So with that in mind, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find that person in the fan chart. So I already went to here, so I'm going to keep going back. If you don't know how far you are back, you can click on here and it'll say, okay, this person was born in about 1590. I mean, that probably is far enough because that's quite a ways back. So anyway, so the first step is find somebody who was born 1800 or further back using your fan chart. So that's the first thing. The second thing then is we're actually going to switch from using the fan chart to using a descendancy chart. So if you think about the way these, a landscape, portrait, and fan chart work is they have you at the bottom or, in the landscape over here on the left side, and then your forefathers, your grandmas and grandpas move out from there. And so that's, your standard kind of pedigree chart. The descendancy chart is actually the opposite. And what it's going to do is it's going to take this person and it's going to go back towards you and show their children, wife and children and their children and their children. And so when we switch to descendancy, it goes the other way. Now, just like the fan chart, you can explode this out to multiple generations. And so here's the person that we had, and then you can see that we have their children and so forth down 4 generations. There are some options over on the right where you can kind of pick how this looks. Make sure that you have the show temple ordinances open here, or this is gonna not get you too far. You can choose whether to turn on whether spouses show up or don't show up. I usually have them on, but it doesn't matter that much. So we've got Tamsin and his descendants for 4 generations. And so what I'm generally gonna do is I'm gonna just be looking for, rather than these yellow and these blue temples, I'm gonna be looking for green ones. Now in this particular case, I didn't find one. And so I'm just gonna go back again and hit the back button and pick somebody else. So we know that if we were to pick this person, well, I guess it would be this one. I'm gonna say if we know if we pick this one that they're gonna have that, but let me just try one of these. It'd be nice to actually show you one.
Do you have any questions to this point?
I just wanted to ask, on your first reservation, the endowment had not been done.
Yeah.
Do you need to wait on that for the sealing?
So, I mean, there is a suggested order. So obviously it used to be that there was a very definitive order for how you wanted to accomplish that. You wanted to always make sure, of course, that the baptism and confirmation were done before the others were done. Once they started to put out there the ability for you to share these with the temple, it kind of started to get a little harder, because now you've got, the temple is going to be printing these out, and you could potentially have some that you're doing that where some of the work hasn't always necessarily been done beforehand. As much as you possibly can, it's recommended that you try to make sure that the baptism and confirmation are done first, then the initiatory, then the endowment, then the sealings. In some circumstances, if you don't have the record for instance, the endowment, you could still do the sealing without waiting for the endowment. It is possible to do that now.
Okay, even though it's shared with temple and you don't have to wait.
Correct. And, so, in the past, we printed out the blue and the pink cards, and we held on to those cards until all the work was done. And so we were managing through, the sequence of events or sequence of ordinances to get them done. They're kind of moving to an ordinance by ordinance kind of card. They're piloting, in fact, right now at some of the temples where you print out just one ordinance and you take that to the temple and you do that. And then rather than waiting for the ordinance card to come back from the recorder's office, you can just go home, because it's going to show up in Family Search almost immediately after it's recorded. And that card is not really of any value now. They're going to shred it or do whatever they're going to do with it. But that means that, then you print the next ordinance. So ultimately, as we kind of move forward, it's going to be more like that. But it's still better to try to get the earlier ordinances done if possible.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, or you could unreserve that, or if you have the ability, you could unreserve the ordinance from the temple and do the endowment. If it's somebody else that has it reserved and shared with the temple, it may be pretty hard to do that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're looking at Nicholas. Any other questions, by the way? That was a good question. Okay, so Nicholas Bruchel, I'm going to go through the same process. We found a person that's older than the 1800s. This one's 1565. We're going to switch back to descendancy. We're going to go to 4 generations. And then we're going to look over here for green temples. So notice we found a couple of green temples. Now we know that this person was one of them that we already looked at that had a duplicate. But we also find William Travener, who is the child of Nicholas Bruchel. So if I click on this temple over here, it opens this dialog up and it allows me to request the ordinance. Now, if the ordinance here if there was a duplicate, it would tell me that right here. Let me show you this one. So if we knew there was going to be a duplicate on Joanne Skyner, and it shows us right there and doesn't allow us to request it. For William Travener, it would allow us to request the ordinance right here. So again, 3 steps. Find somebody that was born before 1800, switch to the descendancy view, and then look for green temples.
Make sure it's open though on your options.
Make sure in your options you have this showing, because if you don't, it's going to be really a wild goose chase, because none of them show up. If you find that there's none there, more than likely you don't have them showing. So any questions on being able to find an ordinance using that 3-step process? Has anybody had success with doing this kind of a process before? And wants to talk about it?
I assume it's very similar to, well, like you said, the ordinance is ready. It does this automatically for you, right?
Yeah, so ordinance ready would pull one of them. If you have a bunch and you want to, accumulate some for family members or something like that, going through ordinance ready one at a time may be kind of cumbersome.
Oh, okay.
And you might find, like, some of us, like my aunt is a genealogist, and I think everybody has an aunt that's a genealogist, right? And she's done a lot of work in our tree. And so it's a little harder sometimes to find green temples. I will say this, though, when I started doing family search, family history related stuff, what I heard from other family members was, don't do it. It's just going to be a waste of time. Aunt Bonnie has done it all. And I mean, we have been doing temple ordinances for years, taking our own family names to the temple that have been on the family tree that Bonnie did all of them for, supposedly. So there's probably more in there than you might think. I have encountered a few members in our ward where we were trying to help them find an ordinance to take for Ward Temple Day. And we spent a lot of time trying to find one because there was a lot of work that had been done. But the other side of that is we have seen situations where we pulled up somebody, went through the same process, and there was just a huge list of all green temples. So, and the ability for them to go through and reserve a bunch of them so that maybe you can go as a family, maybe an extended family once we can, get out of the house and meet other people, would be something that you could do if you wanted to do this approach. Anybody else that's had some luck using this type of an approach to find ordinances?
This is all I do is descendancy research, but something that I would suggest too, that when you are taking names to the temple, and just like you would, missionaries do for convert baptisms, they don't, just rush to the temple with a baptism. They spend a few minutes, just like you would, take time to get to know your ancestors. Click on the name, and if there are sources to attach, look at those sources and maybe see if you can attach a source. If there's, I don't know if you've gone over that yet, but
a little bit, but not a lot.
It's important to maybe click on that name and see if there's a source to attach, and spend a few minutes getting to know that individual. And
That's
I mean,
a really good idea.
These are your ancestors, and maybe take a minute or two to get to know them, get to know who they are for a minute. And so, I don't know, just a suggestion that something that I've learned in my research, that you might want to, I don't know, just know who they are for a minute.
Yeah, I like that. So you can get to the person, more detail on any person by just clicking their name. So here's the one here that has the ordinance to do. When it brings up this little summary card, you click on person, and that gives you the details. There's a couple of things that I wanted to cover here on the person page. That's a really nice way to segue into that, Julie. And so this is the details that we know about Joanne Traverner. In fact, in her case, we don't know a ton, but you can kind of go through the details. This is the detail page. And of course, it's going to tell you their name, their sex, their birth, christening, death, burial. If they've had there's people who have been doing a lot of research around the census records. You may find a lot of great information here and where it talks about different places that they've lived. Sometimes that can be really helpful. Here's her and her husband when they were married. Right now, they don't have any kids that are showing up in Family Search. Here's her parents and when they were married, and then her siblings. So there's a lot of good information you can learn here just by going through the details. The other one that I like is to go through their timeline. So that's the next section here. Because what it basically does is it takes everything that's happened to this person, and she doesn't have a lot, but it takes everything that's happened to this person and it puts it in chronological order. And you can look at it on the map here, a little further out. And sometimes it can be quite interesting. So this is in England. Both things that happened for her happened in exactly the same place. She was christened and she was married in the same place in Dumford, England. This can be really handy when it comes to research, as well as just getting to know the person a little more. In this case, there are no sources recorded, but like Sister Bird was saying, you can learn a lot about a person by what sources are here. If they've got a lot of sources, there's been a fair amount of research that's been done on them. In this case, maybe not so much. And obviously, if there are memories, this would be, stories, pictures, any of those kinds of things that you can find for this person. None of that's available right here for Joan, but any questions on just the detail record here and how to get here, or information about it, or anything like that? So a couple of other things I just want to point out, and then we'll talk about resolving duplicates. So over on the right side here, there's not a lot for Joan, but there could be a lot for other people. It's going to show you a list of any kind of stuff that would help you to start researching. One thing we talked about last week was just going to Family Search, and right on the home page, there's a list of things that you could start with when they finally load. There's this recommended tasks section, and it includes things like hints that you can start looking at. And we'll talk more about that next time we meet, about how to go through hints and such. And so these are things that you could, people that you could start working on. When you're looking at a specific individual, you might find a list of things that you could start working on for this specific individual. What it's pointing out for us right now is, hey, you don't have any sources. Maybe you should get working on that. It also provides ways that you can search records for the person, any changes that have been made, and then other kinds of tools. One of them we'll talk a little bit more about here in a minute is duplicates. In this case, it doesn't think there are any duplicates for this person. From here also, you can print a pedigree chart, a fan chart, family group sheet, and such directly from this page. So lots of good information. Something else that I like, I'm not sure if it'll work with this person that's so far removed from me, but one thing, so when my dad would do these, for a while, I was doing ordinances that were almost all had been found by my father. And one thing that he would do is he would write the relationship on the card. And the beauty of that is that, when I was sitting in the chapel getting ready for the ordinance, I could better understand, what this person really meant to me. I know that they're a part of my family tree, but this is my great-great-great-grandfather or something like that. And you can find that by clicking on View My Relationship. And View My Relationship kind of puts you then in, it puts it in perspective who this person is. And so it's a long ways back. This would be my, let's see, that's my father, grandfather, great, 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 great. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is back 8 generations to get to a daughter of my 7th great grand aunt. Yeah, that's good. I didn't know that before. So anyway, that really helps as well to be able to put that in perspective. Any other thoughts on what we've just talked about or anything we've talked about so far? All right, so I think we've shown an example or two about why you might want to resolve duplicates. Oftentimes, Family Search thinks that there's a duplicate, and in order for you to be able to move forward with the ordinance, you need to do that duplicate. So with that in mind, Shanna is going to kind of walk through with us how to resolve a duplicate. So let me get to the spot where. So some interesting things have happened since the last time we met. The process for resolving duplicates has actually changed a little bit, and we'll go through that. Shanna and I we'd found a couple of examples of duplicates, and over the last few days, we've been working through them. And then today, we could no longer find them on the tree. It like vanished from the tree. So we were able to find them, thank goodness. But I guess the thing to remember is that your tree is dynamic, and it's constantly changing as people are adding to it, as they're validating information, and every now and then making a mistake. So I'm not sure at this point why. The other thing to consider is Family Search is constantly changing. They're constantly improving it and constantly adding to it in ways that make it easier for us. And hopefully we'll find that how to resolve a duplicate is a little bit easier now. So go ahead.
Okay, this was actually from my family tree, but in order to do this on one computer, we kind of just found it. So maybe we can do it this way. So Isabella Laws have some work to be done. Like I said, we had found this previously. So I clicked on her because I'm trying to look for ordinances to do. And I see that she's got some green. So I go to her person. Okay. And, yes, ordinances. Okay. And we can see that there's some stuff that's been printed, it is reserved, but I still have the sealing to spouse that is available. I can tell by looking at it already that there's going to be a problem, okay? Because there's 2 spouses, all right? So you can't be married to 2 spouses.
Oh, you can.
Okay, you can. Okay, but not with the same name probably.
Okay, that's good.
Okay, so that's going to be an issue. So we're going to go to Isabella's details. And we're gonna look at her. We can scroll down. I'm not used to this computer. Okay, it tells me right here on, you can't see my hand, huh? Possible duplicates, there are 0 for her. So we know that she's not the problem, but she has family members, 2 spouses here. So we go to her spouses, go to this first one and look at him. And there's 2 spots on the side over here that it will maybe tell us. Under research help, in this top right corner, it doesn't list any duplicates. It'll tell us probably there if there is one. Or you can go down here to tools. Possible duplicates is the second line there, and it says 0 duplicates. So this is not the right family member as far as where that duplicate might be. So if we back up, go down to the other husband and go to his person, it says over here under our research help, possible duplicate. It'll also say down lower in tools, possible duplicates, there's 2. Sometimes there are as many as, I've seen 6 and 10 duplicates before. There can be a lot and it gets a little crazy on trying to clean up the mess, but it is possible. So if we go back up here to possible duplicate and click on that, we're gonna, it says we can reserve, or not reserve, review the merges, review why there's a possible duplicate. So we click on the review merge. Okay, this is a new format. This was not here a couple of days ago. This is all changed in the last couple of days. They try to make it more user-friendly every time we come in. So we've got those 2 duplicates right here that we can look at and try and decide which one's right. The first step, as they say at the top, is are these people a possible match? That's our first step. Looking at these people, our rule of thumb is find 2 or 3 things that are similar before you decide to merge to make sure they are the same person. So in this example, the birth year is the same, the birthplace is the same, the burial date is the same. You can scroll down. They have at least, now the spouses are different name. Well, first name's the same, last names are different, but they have the same child as well. So in my mind, that's enough information that I feel like these could be a possible match. Okay, so I'm gonna click yes, continue. Okay, now this is a change in the format that just occurred in the last couple of days. So they've switched sides with us. So if you've done merging before, this is a new thing. They've switched the sides in which side keeps. So that doesn't make sense, I know. Okay, so one side is the side that's kept in family search. The other side goes away once they've been merged. So the old way is, I think the left side was kept and the right side was thrown away. It's now switched. So if you've ever done this before, this is a change. It says right there under the surviving person, the information in this column will be saved at the end of the merge. The right side is kept, okay? So what I would do next is to go down through this list and see which side has the most information. So as you look through this, which side has more information? Well, on the birthday here, this side has more information, right? Because it's got the entire place written out. You go down a little further to the burial. The burial has the place written out. That has more information. So you probably want that information, but that's on the left side. The right side has parents and kids listed where the left side doesn't. It's got a whole bunch of kids. So to me, the right side has more information. So, but you can, if it was opposite, you can go up here and switch this, push this switch button right here, and it will switch columns so that there's less to move from one side to the other, because like I said, the right side is the side that's kept. Okay, so let's go through and look at this. Okay, the names are pretty much the same minus the E over here. That's the only difference. The sex is the same. The birth date on the left has more information. So I want to keep that because it's more information. So I'm going to replace that, push the replace button, and it will move to the right side. So you have more information. On the death, this has a year instead of just the deceased. So we would like the year. That's more information. Let's replace that into the record that we're keeping. Go down to the burial. That one has a birth date or a burial date, but it doesn't have a location. That's more information. We're going to replace that to the right side and keep that. And you can tell it says undo. So if you make a mistake, it'll just push it back. So don't panic if you accidentally push the wrong button. As far as kids, spouses, all of that information, it's best to just keep that because you want as much information as you can. So I would suggest just keeping all of that information on the right. Okay, so we got that all in there. And then you continue because we have decided, like I said, that this is probably the same person. So push continue. And then it's going to take you to the screen and you need to explain why you think this merge is correct, just so that when other people come into the computer or to Family Search and see, wait, that guy was there and now he's not, what happened to him and why was it done? You just fill in your reason here of why you decided to merge them. I'll just put the records, whoops. This is really slow, so I don't know. Add. Hopefully I'm spelling right. It's not showing up, so I can't tell. It's really slow.
It's calibrated for my speed of typing.
Whatever. Okay, the records had enough information to suggest that they are the same person. That's my justification and why I decided to merge them. And so they will know that that's the reason I picked for why I merged them. And then you can push finish merge.
Can I say one thing?
Sure, go ahead.
So it used to be that they wanted us to put, I mean, I would see some of these where it would have like what all of the stuff on that one that went away was in there and they would dump it all in there. Certainly you can put bits of information, especially if it might be going away, but you don't have to put all that in there now because it's going to keep a history of it and you can actually see what all that data is, even of the one that goes away.
We want to merge this or save it for another day.
Yeah, let's merge it.
Okay. So then you just push finish merge. It still has another possible duplicate, it looks like, but now you'll notice it says 1 instead of 2. Okay, like I said, sometimes you can have 10 and it's a nightmare, but it's a nightmare the Lord wants us to figure out, right? So we just do it baby steps, one at a time. But eventually you'll get to the point where these merges allow you to just have one person. So you only have to do work for one person instead of several who are actually the same person. So somebody has to do it and we're grateful that they do it. But you'll also, so this says, you'll notice right here, because we did this on under his name, even though it's my family, it'll say by Troy Tuckett, that it was last changed today's date. So if anybody has questions about what in the world you just did, they can send you an email by clicking on your name, or anyway, you know who it is, so you can figure out if your source didn't, or your little explanation didn't give enough information, there's a way to go back and figure that out.
So any questions on this, going through this merge process that we just went through?
What if someone decided they disagreed with your decision and wanted to reverse it? Is that possible?
They can. So right here where it says merge completed, they can click on this and they can reverse the merge, and it would take it back to the way that it was before with the two records. I've had a situation where I actually did a merge and then found out later that it was wrong, and it ended up being that I had merged the father and the son, and then I'd done a bunch of other things. And so I had to reverse all of the things that I had done before and then get to the merge and reverse the merge and then be able to go forward with the new information that I had. Because there are times, you're making a decision with any of this stuff in Family Search based on the information you have. And for a merge, you really have 3 outcomes. You can go in and look at it and say, boy, I just don't have enough information to know if these are the same people. And so you cancel out. And you go on to something else and you'll come back to it later when maybe there's more information, or maybe you can do some research and figure out what that additional information is. Like we did, we had a pretty good feeling that it was the same, and so we finished the merge. The other outcome that you could possibly see is that with the information you have, you are really sure that these 2 people are not the same. And if you noticed on the top bar, one thing you could do is say, this is not a match. And if you say it's not a match, it actually does resolve the duplicate, and it would allow you to do the ordinance. And so, you can continue on, but obviously you want to make sure, you want to feel pretty confident that they're not a match, in the same way that you want to feel pretty confident that they are a match. So good question. Other questions?
Don't you also want to, like for example, in a couple of those pieces of information, it was like adding the place where the guy was born or died or something. And so would you go back and try to find a source that verifies that that's correct?
You can certainly do that, because on this one, there's only one source for the whole thing. So there's a lot of information on here without any source recovered. I mean, I would say that probably about any of those, because these are really pretty close to the same. In fact, the birth name here is the same in both cases, and I don't know, this one's just spelled a little bit differently. You definitely could try to verify other bits of information that are incorporated into the merge for sure if they don't have a source. That's a good point.
And we'll talk about sources another time. We'll get into more of how to find sources and attach them and all of that.
Other questions about merges?
I'm just happy to know you can undo something. I've been sitting there thinking, how do I decide if this is really, maybe there's no reference, there's no way to really tell, but still you're stuck. And so I'm glad to know that you can go back if you need to.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of, so when there was a period of time when indexed records that came in would go through this process where the church would basically create a record for everything they found in that index. So they would go through every birth certificate that was indexed and they would create a new record for it. And that was, I think, really before they understood what the problems there would be with duplicates. So what the result of that is, there are times when you find lots of duplicates for a person because they had a lot of their records that were indexed. And there may be one element of data on it. Maybe it just has a name and a birth date, or it just has, census information or whatever. There's a source associated with it in most of those cases, but you end up with lots of records with one or two little bits. Those are pretty hard because we, like Shanna was saying, we really try to use this rule of let's find 2 or 3 things that are the same to be able to help us have a comfort level that these are the same people. And there are times when, because of the way that was done for a while, you're going to find that there aren't 2 or 3 things that are the same.
One thing that we always try to say too is, because you're doing your family's research, the Lord has given you a mantle here that he will, with some revelation that will help you feel what's right. You'll know, I'll feel like this is okay. This, what I'm doing is the right thing or not. You'll have some guidance there.
Yeah, that's why it's important when you're going to do family history related work, just to start with a prayer, because you're going to need it. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? So in a couple of weeks, we're gonna, no, she had to drop. In a couple of weeks, we will continue on kind of with where we've gone from here. We'll start talking about more kind of on the research side a little bit. I could say research light, how to look at sources and better understand them, how to use hints, and then ultimately how to use some of the external, how to search for a record and some things like that. So more to come on that, but that's kind of where we're heading for the next time that we meet.
It looks like Julie sent a message saying she'll be available next week for more index training. If anybody's interested in doing more learning more on indexing, that will be next week, and we will follow her the week after.
So thanks for your time. Is there somebody who would be willing to say a prayer for us to close this out?
I can.
Okay.
Our dear Father in heaven, we are thankful for the opportunity that we have to meet together and to further our knowledge in family search and to further expand the salvation of man and bringing more souls to thee. We thank thee for thy guidance and pray that we may feel it as we do family history. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.